Good evening and welcome to I'm Listening, Stay Connected. I'm Listening is a 24/7, 365 initiative that works to destigmatize mental health. If you want to join the conversation, you can always do so by sending your questions to our Loveline DMs or by tweeting them with the hashtag I'm Listening, and we'll be answering those throughout the show as well as throughout the week. And you can check out all of our past shows on alltheradio.com handles, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter. Got a great show planned for you. We have JoJo. We'll also be playing a clip of her new song, as well as Dr. Lisa Feldman Barrett talking about emotions. But I wanted to start the show with an interesting discussion on coping mechanisms. And it centers around emotional eating. Culturally, we slam that. We say, don't eat your emotions. But, you know, coping mechanisms, they are vast, they are creative, they're diversified. It is okay to eat your emotions. It's okay to use food as a coping mechanism. We can nap to cope. We can read a book. We can take a bath. We can do yoga. You're allowed to also use food or even sex. But those tend to be the two things in our culture that we really shame and get anxious if people are using them. But we want to decrease that. Know that right now, other times in our lives as well, but especially right now, we don't always have what we call internal resources that are resilient or powerful enough to deal with what's happening outside of us. And this is a really tough time. We also have a lot of cultural pleasure phobia, and we feel like everything has to have some kind of productive outcome. You know, we want to understand what's in it for you, but things like food are just about often bringing us joy. And again, if you're anxious or have had a rough day, sometimes food is a beautiful way to really soothe yourself and cope with that. And we also circle back and know that sizeism and fat phobia are not part of mental health. I work with so many clients on them learning how to love and feel good in the body they have exactly as they have them. Now, of course, we're seeing on social media a lot of people talking about using things like alcohol as a coping mechanism. We culturally are actually pretty okay with that. We shouldn't be. Alcohol can be very problematic. I'm afraid that a lot of people might come out of this time having really internalized the use of alcohol. Now, I'd rather people turn to cookies or ice cream than I would for them to go to alcohol. Alcohol spikes domestic violence, has a negative impact on every system in our body. I don't want us to internalize any more of diet culture, body shaming, or fat phobia. Because remember, restriction with all the stress, shame, and anxiety in it is not a part of mental health. So I want us to know that, though, mental health is about a full range of coping mechanisms. I do get a little nervous clinically if someone's overusing and relying upon the same ones over and over and over. So do take some time to sit with what you're feeling. Ask yourself what that's about. Is there a way to maybe resolve that? Or is it about learning how to sit with it and move forward with it? Is there any other way to get that need met or to cope? And if food becomes what makes most sense to you and that's what's most comfortable for you, that's okay, because it's all right to have some added weight gain. There's nothing wrong with gaining some weight. And we want to be very thoughtful about, again, the way we're talking about our bodies and food, especially right now, because a lot of us are struggling to do the best we can. All right, I had a question that came in for me. This question asks, what do you think about all the places that are reopening early? Is this safe or not? Oh, it's a good question. It actually makes me very anxious. I err on the side of safety. I work with a lot of individuals and I have a lot of people in my life that are at high risk for COVID infection. And so I'm always trying to be thoughtful about the ways that they can maybe be impacted by this. Again, we talk a lot on the show about collective consciousness, really paying attention with empathy to the way that we impact those around us. We're also coming up on a holiday weekend. And I know people with the warmer weather and the holiday weekend really want to get out there and socialize. I'm even seeing some of my neighbors bringing people together and they're not social distancing or wearing masks. So I have some concerns and anxiety about that. But we'll continue to talk more about that down the road. Now let's go to JoJo, singer, songwriter, and actress. How are you? Welcome to the show.
Ooh.
There you are.
Hi.
How are you?
I'm good. I've been listening to what you've just been saying and so much is resonating with me.
Oh, beautiful. I hope to get into some of it. But before we do, I want to just start by asking JoJo right now, how is your mental health doing? I'm asking that of everybody.
Am I framed up? Am I okay?
We got you. You sit tight and we'll kind of move around you.
All right, cool. I have been good. I have everything I need. And I just got a treadmill actually in my basement. I ordered one and that has been a game changer for me because I needed somewhere to put my energy and my anxiousness. But I've been okay. My mom is actually here living with me at the moment. She moved from Boston to LA just a few months before quarantine hit. And so now this like temporary living arrangement has turned into something that's a little bit more indefinite.
Oh, I'm glad that you have her. That's sweet. Good
Me
timing on
too.
that end. And also
Yeah.
movement. You talked about movement. That's something that was powerful for me as well. You know, I was starting to feel my mood shift, and I realized I'm sitting too much. Everything I do professionally is about sitting, and so I was
Yes.
like, I got to move.
Yes. As human beings, I think we do need to. I mean, if we're fortunate enough to be able-bodied and to have the um, ability of movement, like it just feels so good. So I love to stretch. I love to run. I love to do yoga. I've tried to stay active during this time, and get outside a couple times a day. I have a dog, so that's really helpful.
Oh, beautiful. So would you say having your mom nearby, the dog, and exercise, is that the main forms of self-care you're using right now?
Yes, but when you were talking about food, I've been cooking and baking a ton and like trying new recipes. I have some friends that live not far from me, and I've dropped off little care packages of vegan cookies. I don't know if does that break like what the protocol of this thing is. I don't know if it is, but I'm like, I love you. I'm thinking of you. It's like part of my love language, I think.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, I've just been really like definitely upping my sugar intake, to be honest with you, and trying not to feel guilty about it, trying not to beat myself up for being softer than I was coming into quarantine. You know what
Yeah.
I mean?
Yeah. And okay, so let's unpack that. I mean, first off, I think it's adorable that you're making care packages. That has to mean a lot to people. I also love that they're vegan and plant-based. I'm vegan myself right here, so I'm all about that one. But let's talk about our relationship to our bodies, because that's one of the things that a lot of the patients that are still in my practice, I'm doing telemedicine, are talking about, where they're encountering their body differently because they don't have access to the gym or the foods they choose. I know that you've talked about your own struggles with just being in the spotlight, also being female identified, people weighing in on that. Talk to us about your journey around being body positive.
I realized that my eating or my thoughts around food were disordered when and I still identify with that. I mean, I can fall into patterns um, where I don't stop eating, you know what I mean, at night. And I realize that I'm doing it to self-soothe. And I did like that you said that there's nothing wrong with using that as a coping mechanism. It's just like identifying what it is. But my relationship with my body, I've had to turn a corner where I have reclaimed my feelings on it. I felt like I was I was told when I was like 18, 19 that in order to put out a record, I needed to lose weight, and that I didn't look good enough to sell the music that I was making. The music I was making was sexier, edgier, and would require something different of me. And that's what I was told. I did subscribe to that, and I was so upset about being put with a trainer. I was upset about being put on a diet, and it took me several years to find pleasure, my own pleasure, in feeling strong, feeling capable, and actually really reaping a benefit from the drugs that my mind creates when I'm, working out, when I'm exerting myself. And I had to like develop my own relationship with working out and eating well. So like adopting a plant-based diet because it feels good to me, not because I'm terrified of what it will mean if I'm a certain weight or, a size, whatever.
Yeah, I mean, so much in that. Because number one, I agree with you. We want to eat what makes us feel good, and we want to root it in that. Like, how do I feel when I eat this thing? It shouldn't be about how do I look. But it hurts my heart as a mental health professional to know that you, at such a vulnerable age, in the spotlight, which is just a level of vulnerability already, that you have these people that are supposed to be looking out for you, helping you internalize really negative messaging about your body. So I'm horrified to hear that. And you also were quoted as saying that you were put by a dietitian on like a 500 calorie diet a day.
Have you heard of these injections where it makes your body think that you're pregnant and it takes the nutrition, I guess, that would go to the baby? And I'm not exactly sure what it's called, but this is how it was explained to me. I kept these vials in my refrigerator, and I'm almost I'm in my late 20s now, and thinking back to myself as like 19 years old when I was doing this, I'm upset that I didn't have the confidence or the courage to be like, I'm not doing that. But I did. and I thought that it was a part of my job.
Yeah.
And I'm so glad that in 2020 we are not standing for that anymore. Like women are, there's so many different examples of how to be a person, how to be an artist, how to be a female identified person. And you know, just so many ways to be sexy and beautiful and fly. And it didn't feel like that 10 years ago.
Yeah, it is a powerful moment. I'm with you. We are moving into also like a fourth wave of feminism. It's body positive, sex positive, female sexual empowerment.
Yes.
Like I'm here for it. And one of the more stunning moments was, you know, when Adele came forward and showed her weight loss, and all of a sudden everyone has a commentary on her body. And this individual is such a talented person, won so many awards, and it's like that is what her worth should be rooted in.
And I do think that people celebrate how incredible Adele is, and know that she's beautiful at any size. The woman is beautiful,
she
objectively.
Is.
Like
yeah.
what a stunning person. I just hope that, because I know that when I started to get compliments, when I would be losing weight, or when I would be depleting myself, you know, because I've experimented with so many different things, with like carb cycling, with, anyway, I don't want to like trigger anybody,
Sure.
but like I've gotten into so many different types of ways of eating until figuring out what really makes me feel alive and confident and positive and all those things. I just hope that, you know, the feedback that she's getting isn't a negative thing for her psyche, of course, you know, because it had been for me, when people be like, oh my God, you look incredible. Then it would make me nervous if I were to relax the way I look a little bit, you know?
That's right. Compliments, people think that they're doing something positive for us, but we hear them saying, this is what I want and expect from you, and this is what you need to keep doing. And so it like holds the bar high in a way we're not necessarily ready for. So let's talk about your music. You've got a new album that came out. I had a fan of yours that slid into my DMs and made me promise to say this to you. So even though we have fan questions for you that we'll ask you later, this fan said, and I quote, JoJo, please tell her that she's an absolute icon, that she is a musical genius. I'm glad her music is back out, and please tell her I love her. So there that is.
Oh my God, thank you for telling me that. Yes. Thank you.
Yes.
That's so sweet.
Everyone was stoked that you were coming on. So let's talk about your music. How do you think music and mental health has intersected for you?
Ooh, me,
Well, I know that you address your truth in your music, so it's in there in that way.
No, exactly. I was just trying to figure out how to start it. My therapy, my experience with going to therapy and like being pretty consistent with somebody over the past decade has made it possible for me to be as transparent as I am, I think. And I'm not embarrassed. I feel really comfortable actually just saying where I've been, where I've messed up, where I am now, where I see myself. I have let go of a lot of shame, and I had so much. I had the shame monster on my back, and my therapist really helped me get her away. I actually like personified my shame and guilt as this other person. I called her Berlinda. And I'm like, whenever Berlinda is trying to take over me, I'm just like, Berlinda, yo, sit down. Like, I don't need you. You're not helpful. You're whack. You hate me. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
and so
I love
like
that.
I have disconnected that from myself. Like, and it's through this album is so raw and connected to like where I've been in the past couple of years, which was on this journey of realizing I needed to be alone, acknowledging that I was like engaging in a lot of behaviors where I was trying to escape myself and trying to self-soothe in, you know, with sex and food and substances. And I just wanted to live differently, try something different and get a different result from the relationships I had in my life. And I didn't like the patterns I saw myself getting into with like just always having a boyfriend and never really being alone. I was like, I need to establish my own boundaries, my own whole thing.
Well, as a therapist, you're warming my heart because the vulnerability is how we push through shame, right? Shame is maintained in silence and secrecy, and you are putting it out there, and that's how you work through.
And it does make me feel much more powerful, like to be able to say certain things and not be worried about someone calling me out for something. I'm like, I'm already it's already there. It is what it is. And I also find that I love the connection that you can make and deepen with people when you make yourself vulnerable. Then you tend to inspire other people to open up, and that can just feel so. That's such a beautiful part of being human. I love that.
Yeah, and that's the purpose of the show. That's why we called it I'm Listening, Stay Connected. We want, and I ask every guest, like, how's your mental health? I want people to get familiar, hearing people talk about it. And also that's what I tell the patients I work with is we walk away from a relationship of any kind if we've been vulnerable, really feeling like we got to know each other and we connected. So it's in those moments when we show our parts that have the most shame and weakness that we really bond with people. And so I tell people seek those moments.
Absolutely. I think it's so powerful, and it can feel scary because you're like, is this person going to use this against me one day? But screw that.
That's
Like
right.
it's worth it. It's worth it. Trust in that process, I think.
Well, we want to play a quick clip of Man from your new album, Good to Know. So let's take a quick watch and listen.
You know me, I just don't stop. I've been down, but I'm back up. No, they all had a little crush. Now they all want a little love. I've been getting comfortable on my own and shit. Loving it, I can handle it. Yeah. So if I'm gonna love someone, well, damn, I'm gonna need a.
I have so much more I want to talk to you about. But...
someone who want me.
Are you in LA?
I need somebody who can love me like I love me like I can.
Yep. All right, back. All right, we're back. JoJo, we have some questions that came in from some fans I'd love for you to answer with us.
I'd love to. Let's go.
The first one asks, being in the public's eye, did you have any fears about opening up about your mental health and family history?
More so about my family history, because especially the family members that are still living, it's not really my business to share. You know, their struggles with addiction or depression or anxiety, but then I feel conflicted because certain things have affected me directly based on, you know, what they were going through. So as far as my own struggles, no, because other people have paved the way in talking about mental health, and I think we do live in a time that's better than any other, where the stigma is, it's almost like, how dare you try to make me feel crazy for just speaking on something that so many of us go through. It didn't feel like something I shouldn't be talking about.
I love that. Like, let me be a person, right?
Yeah, I'm grateful. I think maybe my mom just raised me that way, to be a person first.
Yeah. Well, looking at your journey, there's so much resilience, and I'd love to have you back on some point to talk about that, but I have some questions to get to, but you have so much resilience. So well done. This question asks, hi, JoJo, what has been the most exciting and best part about releasing this album?
The feedback from you, from you know, the listeners, because making the album was an amazing process, was very cathartic, and it was satisfying, but the ultimate satisfaction is putting it out and having people, you know, do covers to it and make dances to it and tag me in their, you know, pictures of how they're listening to it. I just love that. It's so cool. And it makes me feel connected in this time where we're all social distancing, to know that my music is in people's earbuds and in their car and in their home. And that's been the coolest, to know that they'll look back on this time and this body of work will have been a part of it.
Yeah, you are a part of helping people with their mental health, because music can elevate us. It can let us go deeper. So that's stunning. Final question says, what made you realize that you needed to reach out and get help? Hey, JoJo.
Hey, I was in a relationship like around the time that I started talking to my therapist, probably 20, where it was just, we were both terrible to each other. It was really, really unhealthy. And I was not proud of who I was. I was not proud of the behavior that I was engaging in. Like, we were fighting in the streets. We were doing all types of just acting crazy. And I think that that's what propelled me toward therapy. And also I was going through so much family stuff that felt completely overwhelming. I had let my mom go as my manager. My dad was struggling with addiction and eventually lost his battle with it a few years ago. And I needed some professional assistance to stay afloat. And I'm very thankful to her for that.
All right. That's what I'm trying to tell people as well. If you need the extra support, reach out, get some therapy. JoJo, your vulnerability and authenticity is so healing. It's so powerful. Thank you for being a part of our show.
Thank you. I can't wait to see you in person. I'd love to talk more.
We will. Absolutely. Have a great night. Thank you so much.
You too.
Bye. I love that. I mean, that's what we're all trying to do. We're trying to find the best way through. Music, such a powerful companion. And people like JoJo, so much resilience, really working on sharing their vulnerability to help other people normalize and humanize what we're going through. And that's what I want to come out of this time is feel what you're feeling. And again, we're asking people, how's your mental health? So that they know we are a safe person that they can go to if they're struggling. And also we're getting everyone familiar hearing mental health discussed because it has far too much shame and that keeps people struggling. So people are talking about all different kinds of new experiences. Yes, pandemic is bringing in new feelings, new experiences, new thought patterns. And one of them is, why am I obsessed with ... Yep, fill in the blank. Why am I obsessed with my body? Why am I obsessed with what my partner's doing, how they're eating, the way they sleep, something about our children? It's a lot of time and space. Our mind's allowed to focus and wander on some of these things. So I'm telling people, build in a routine. If you are obsessing about things that don't have a lot of meaning and value, it might be because you have too much time and space to let that happen. So refocus, distract yourself, healthy distractions. There's tons of them. I want people to find some moments of joy and fun. But again, structure and routine, having a plan for your day and your time, it's going to help us get through this. And finally, that compassion piece. Got to learn to let some of that stuff go right now. But right now, let's go to Dr. Lisa Feldman, Barrett, psychologist and author of the books, How Emotions Are Made, and coming out in November, 7.5 Lessons About the Brain. How are you? Welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me on your show.
Yeah, I want to jump in and just say thank you for the work you're doing. I was researching your work and I also was watching some of your talks, and you made some really profound statements that go against a lot of what we assume in our culture about emotions. One of the powerful ones being that emotions and physical movements associated with them are not universal, which means we can't make assumptions about what we're seeing based on our own experience. Talk to us more about that.
Sure. Well, I think for many years, the assumption was that everyone in the world was born with a set of emotion circuits that were pre-wired into the brain. And when one of them fired, like, say, the fear circuit, everyone around the world would, when that circuit triggered, would feel the same thing. Their face would make the same expression, kind of a wide-eyed, gasping face, like, that their bodies would do the same thing, and that everyone around the world could recognize that wide-eyed, gasping face as a fearful face. And the same thing was people thought was true for anger and for happiness and so on. And it turns out that not only are emotions not universal, but you yourself don't always widen your eyes and gasp when you're fearful. You don't always scowl when you're angry. You don't always smile when you're happy. Really, when it comes to emotion, variation is the norm, meaning you yourself have a whole kind of vocabulary of emotional feelings and emotional behaviors, and so do I, and so do your listeners. And they're different, not completely different, but somewhat non-overlapping. And so when you and I are having a conversation, or when you're having a conversation with someone else, your brain isn't reading someone's facial expressions or their body movements. Body movements are not a language to read. Really, your brain is guessing. It's making guesses based on your own past experience. What does the curl of a lip or the raise of an eyebrow mean in this situation for this person? So brains are always guessing. We're always making inferences, and sometimes our guesses are right, spot on, and sometimes they're not. And this variation you see within people within the same culture, and definitely you see it across cultures.
And that's why I like it. Like when you said what you just said, and when I was looking at your work, it actually soothed me because it's very humanizing and it honors diversity. And it means that we can't make these American Western centric assumptions about other cultures and how they show things and feel things. So I found that like very humanizing and liberating. And it brought up what I feel when people talk about books around dream symbols and memories. And I would say, you know, everyone's association is going to be different based on their experience and their lifestyle. We can't keep trying to universalize everything, but science often tries to take research and then universalize it like that. So I liked what you said.
Yeah, I mean, science sometimes does that. What I would say is that some scientists have the assumption that they're looking for universal laws that hold for everywhere in the world. But I think there's enough evidence now from physics, from chemistry, from biology, certainly, and even from psychology that there aren't really universal laws. There are laws that hold in certain circumstances and not others, basically. So I do think it's very humanizing to realize that variation is the norm. Variation is the norm when it comes to your emotions. Variation is the norm when it comes to the characteristics that people have. I mean, in our culture, in Western culture, we divide up the mind into like thinking and feeling. And, you know, with this idea that the brain is kind of a battleground between thoughts and feelings, between rationality and emotionality, and that these two are kind of like in a battle for control of your behavior. That's a very Western narrative. There are no parts of your brain that are for emotion, no parts of your brain that are for cognition. Your whole brain participates when you're having a thought or when you're having a feeling. But in half the world, thoughts and feelings are not separate things. In half the world, mental feelings and physical states of the body are not separate things. These are Western distinctions. And so even some of our most kind of basic ways of understanding ourselves and each other are scripted by our culture.
I mean, thank you for saying what you just said, because I've been saying that in my own versions, in my own ways around sexuality and gender and relationality. And you just swooped in with like a more neurological underpinning around that. So that's stunning. And I like what that means for us, because what I hear in some of that is you have to have more vulnerability and intimacy in your relationships by asking more questions. You can't make assumptions. You have to actually say, what did you mean by that? How do you feel? How was your mental health?
Yeah, the thing that is really important, I think, in understanding how this works, and it's something that some people just totally embrace, but it's something that some people really resist, and that is that even though your brain works in a really automatic way, meaning you're not trying usually to feel things, your brain usually is kind of running on autopilot to some extent, you really do have more control over your experiences than you might think.
And that's a good thing, right? And that's a good thing, not to shame someone, like empower yourself with that knowledge.
Yeah, exactly. It's not at all to shame people. I mean, basically your brain is always making guesses about sights and sounds and smells. It has to figure out what they mean, and it's using past experience to do that. So you have a little more control, and it means you also have a little more responsibility for making the effort to have a little bit more intimacy, or to change your the way that your brain is wired if you had bad experiences in the past. You know, one thing I like to say to people is, you know, sometimes we're responsible for things not because we caused them, not because we're the blame really, but because we're the only ones who can change it. And so if you're someone who's unlucky enough to have had something really tragic and bad happen to you, which totally sucks, you know, you do have some control over creating experiences for yourself, architecting your life in a way that will help to rewire your brain, to give you new experiences, which your brain will use later on, you know, automatically to make those guesses. But that's a hard thing to do, even though we have more control and we have a little bit more responsibility to have the kind of life, to be the kind of person we want to be. It requires a lot of effort, and it's really hard. And some people have had experiences that make it, even harder. And I liked what you said, actually, when you were right before you introduced me. You said, this is a time for people to have a little more compassion for themselves. And I think that's exactly right. I think most of us don't have brains that are wired to deal with a pandemic. Yeah. And, that requires of us to be a little bit more deliberate in how we architect our interactions. It means that we have to make a little bit more effort to cultivate intimacy and maintain.
But again, I hear hope in that. I hear freedom. Yeah. I hear change. And so that's why, I love that. Nothing has to be in the future as it was now if you're willing to put in the effort. There's beauty to me in that. I love that.
Yeah, exactly. And the really cool thing about the way the brain works is that, to us, it feels like, to you right now, right? To me right now, it feels like we're having this conversation. You're reacting to the things that I say, right? So you're reacting to every single word that comes out of my
mouth. Yeah.
Mouth. Your brain predicted, I would say that, because actually in reality, even though to us it feels like we're reacting to stuff in the world, actually our brains are predicting. Our brains are always one step ahead of where we need to be and making guesses using past experience all the time. So that means, and this is kind of a wild trip, right? That means that your brain is using your past to make a guess about your immediate future that will become your present.
Which is why I also try to hold people responsible for the impact they have on people, because you might be part of determining how they predict future relationships and interactions.
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
Care and compassion around all that dating. Dr. Lisa Feldman Barrett, we have some questions that came in that I'd love for you to answer with us.
Sure. I'm very happy to.
This first one asks, I know we are in a pandemic, but every day feels like a bad day. I just want to have a few good ones. How can I make some of my bad days better?
Well, I think the thing to realize that's really important, actually, is that your brain basically is one of its main jobs is to run a budget for your body. Basically, it's not budgeting money. It's budgeting like glucose and salt and water and oxygen and things like that. And so when your body budget is starting to run a deficit, maybe you're not sleeping enough, maybe you're not eating healthfully, maybe you're not exercising sufficiently, maybe there are additional stresses. What happens is you start to run a deficit in that budget, and basically that makes you feel, I don't know if I'm allowed to swear on your show. I have a little bit of a potty mouth. Basically, it makes you feel like shit. You just feel horrible.
Right.
And you feel like you're having a bad day. That bad day, though, is part of it is coming from the fact that your body budget is running a deficit. So what are some things you can do? Well, one thing you can do, probably the most important thing you can do, I'm going to sound like a mother now, but I'm actually being a neuroscientist. One of the most important things you can do is actually get enough sleep. So make sure that you're getting outside every day if you can. Make sure that you have enough vitamin D, which is important. And make sure these things will actually help you get enough sleep. Make sure that you're eating healthfully. So try to do what you can to keep your body budget kind of solvent. And that's going to make it harder for you to feel unpleasant. Another thing that you can do is you can have a meaningful social connection to somebody else, because it turns out that your brain doesn't just regulate your own body budget. It actually makes, figuratively speaking, deposits and withdrawals into somebody else's. So one way research suggests that you can feel better is to do something nice for somebody else. It's to reach out and have a meaningful connection with somebody else. What does reach out mean? in the time of COVID? Well, it might mean something like this, like having a conversation with someone where you disclose how you're feeling and they hear you, and then they disclose how they're feeling, and then you hear them. And this is how we build intimacy with people, and that actually helps us feel better because we're social animals, and we are caretakers of each other's nervous systems. So that's something that you can do to feel better. Another thing that you can do, one more thing, there are lots of things, but one more thing you can do to feel better, surprisingly, is to actually find words to label how you're feeling. So for example, I'm having a bad day, doesn't have a lot of information in it. It doesn't really tell you what to do to make yourself feel better. But the wonderful thing about words is that they're like prescriptions for action in a sense. And there are all sorts of words that can give more precision to what you're feeling, which will help you figure out what to do. So, are you feeling weary? Are you feeling tired? Are you feeling ambivalent? There's a whole set of words about emotion from other languages in my book, How Emotions Are Made, that help you put words to things and understand feelings to make sense of them so that it's not just good or bad. So, for example, are you feeling stenochoria, which is the Greek word for, I'm reading from this because I don't have them all memorized, okay. A feeling of like hopeless and suffocation and constriction. Wow. Or are you feeling, orenda, which is the Huron word for having the strength to change something in the face of a powerful force, and so on.
Well, what I like about, I was going to say,
research shows that if you have words for negative emotions to give them more granularity, actually you end up coping with them better, you're more resistant to illness, and so on and so forth.
No, I love that. It also gives you, it's more honest, it gives you more control. It lets you also know there's more possibilities. I like that when I see more word choices. There's other ways to see things. Dr. Lisa Feldman Barrett, thank you so much. And congratulations on the book, 7.5 Lessons About the Brain, coming out in November. Thank you for being on our show tonight.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thank you so much.
Have a beautiful night.
Be well.
Bye-bye. And what I love is that there's consistency. All the different guests that have come on, depending on what area of healthcare or mental health they work in, it's pretty unanimous that we need social connection. We need adequate and good sleep. We want to focus on getting our bodies moving and, of course, getting outdoors and getting some sunlight. So add that to your self-care plan. All right, y'all. Well, you can check out all of our past episodes on all the radio.com handles. We'll be back tomorrow at 5 p.m. Pacific. That is 8 p.m. Eastern Standard. As always, thanks for hanging out with me, and you all have an awesome, awesome night.